Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2021 Counselors at the Capitol. On behalf of the advocacy team and the team from Nelson Mullins, our lobbyist, we are just welcome you, and we're so happy that you've found a way to join us this morning. Typically, we would be at the Capitol and having a business meeting, meeting legislators, going to the different chambers, hearing resolutions, proclamations. But this morning, as with everything else, we've had to hold this meeting virtually to keep all of you safe and healthy. But we have a great morning in store for you. So a lot of folks have agreed to help us out with this, and we hope you find this next couple of hours with us very informative and useful. And then we will all plan to be together next February during National School Counseling Week at the Capitol. So thanks for joining us. We appreciate the work you do so much, and happy National School Counseling Week. I hope that you guys are being celebrated in a really big kind of way in your schools and celebrating each other and yourselves, because the work you do is amazing. So thank you. Before we get started with our event, I want to introduce to you Jennifer Jones. Jennifer is our current GSCA president. She has done an amazing job this year in spite of the pandemic, having to cancel our face-to-face conference in Savannah, but to be the leader with her conference team and working with the management office to produce a really wonderful virtual conference and to lead during a really hard time. So Jennifer, we appreciate you. We want you to bring greetings of welcome to our participants.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you so much, Gail, for that sweet introduction. Thank you all who have joined us this morning. This certainly would not be possible without our advocacy team, Ms. Gail Smith, Dr. Jennifer Diaz, and Ms. Kirby Mark. We certainly want to thank them for all of their work, and certainly we have to mention our lobbyists, Mr. George Ray and Ms. Helen Sloat. They work tirelessly, and we certainly do not always see what they do, but please know, our GSCA members, please know that they do a lot of work that we never get to see. They are speaking with our legislators, and they are fighting for us to make sure that our voices are heard and that people are knowing what our true roles are in the school and how important our roles are in the school. So if you do get a chance, could all of our school counselors, could you please, send Miss Helen or Mr. George a quick note to tell them how much you appreciate them and the hard work that they do for us all the time. It's not just during this time of the year, it is every day that they're up there in the ears of our legislators, reminding them how important we are. So to Miss Helen and to George, thank you so much on behalf of our GSCA members. If we were able to be there, I would certainly give you a big old hug. Ever since that I have taken office, I have not been able to meet y'all in person. So when this is over, I'm going to drive on up there to Atlanta, and I'm going to take y'all to lunch. So I'm going to be able to see y'all. So I want to thank you on behalf of GSCA, and to Jennifer Diaz, Gail Smith, and Kirby, thank you so much. To all you GSCA members who are on here today, thank you for what you do every day. I know as one of you, I sit in a high school and I do the work that you do. So I know what we have been facing since March 12th of last year. We're reaching a year of this. So I know what we are doing every day, from students to teachers to admins to parents to communities. I know what we are facing every single day. I definitely understand the impact of what we are doing. So thank you for your hard work. I pray that you continue to be safe and healthy, and that you just, always remember that what you do is excellent, and you matter every single day. And so even if your superintendents and your districts and your admins don't tell you that you're appreciated, you are appreciated. And we know that you know what you're doing and that you play a huge role in your school. So all of us who are on here, we're giving you a huge pat on the back and we wish you a wonderful National School Counselors Week. So I appreciate all of you joining this week. I thank you for what you've done. I thank my team for this amazing conference. It would not have been without them that this has been what it is. So thank you all. I have been so honored to serve as your president this year. Once again, thank you to my advocacy team. Thank you to George and Miss Helen. We couldn't do this without you. So y'all just keep plugging at it. We are behind y'all all the way. And thank you, thank you, thank you. So I'm going to turn it back over to Miss Gail, and we look forward to hearing what you all are going to share with us today.
Hey, Jennifer, thank you so much. And I want to give another quick shout out to Lisa at Nardone. Lisa is behind the scenes producing our event this morning. She's a wizard. She is going to move us through this entire event this morning, from a live broadcast to recorded broadcast, and she's back there, and I just want her to know, and the team at Nardone, that we really appreciate everything they've done to make this conference and this event possible, and making us look good. So thanks to all. And now I want to turn this over to the advocacy chairs and let them introduce themselves and make a few comments. Kirby, do you want to go next?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kirby Mark, and I am so excited to see you all this morning. I am also excited to be part of the advocacy team because we know that it is through advocacy over the years that we have been able to move forward and to be recognized as school counselors and also receive a lot of the accolades that we deserve. And so I am super excited to start this event with you guys this morning. It is my first year on the advocacy team with the fabulous Gail Smith and Dr. Jennifer Diaz. And so I've learned a lot, and I cannot wait to continue serving you so that we can move forward the purpose of the school counselors here in Georgia. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirby. And we are so grateful to have you with us too. Kind of the point of today is to encourage more folks to join us on our advocacy team and our advocacy efforts, because it really is our voices, those of us that are in the school building, that need to flow through Helen and George and Stan to our legislators, so that we know that we're being heard, and that, you know, the voices of our students are being heard, and they know what we need so that we can do a better job for our students. So I'm so excited. I get butterflies and chills when we talk about work at the Capitol and work with our legislators. So I hope y'all are excited about this too, because we've got lots of great things coming today. I know it's going to feel different because, you know, I'm in the four walls of my office, and it's going to feel different from you, but I still have chills because this stuff is just exciting. So thanks for joining us, everybody.
And I am so excited, guys. We've broken a record. We have 102 attendees so far. Yay! So thank you. Just very quickly, I want to say Helen Sloat is with Nelson Mullins. I said that backwards. Helen Sloat is with Nelson Mullins. I don't know what I just did, but it came out backwards. She works with a team of folks, and George Ray is here from the firm. And do we see Stan yet? Matt, have they joined us yet?
He's running around on the second floor.
Okay, well, it's a team of 4 who works together to be our voice at the Capitol, and we work with them. They work for us through the management office, so they're here, and they're going to be talking to you later, but just wanted to say good morning and acknowledge that you're here.
Good morning.
Yes. So what we're going to do now is here, typically when we meet virtually, we have legislators who join our group to talk to you, to bring greetings, and just to share with you their ideas about school counseling and their thanks to you for the work that you do. So we've had a few who've agreed, they've pre-recorded their greetings for you, and we're going to hear from them at this time.
Hello, Georgia School Counselors. I am so happy to be with you today. I want to wish you a happy National School Counselor Week and welcome you to the Georgia State Capitol, virtually at least, your capital. I'm so thrilled to be with you and to celebrate you today. My name is Matthew Wilson. I am the state representative for House District 80. I represent portions of DeKalb and Fulton counties and 5 cities, actually: Atlanta, Brookhaven, Chamblee, Dunwoody, and Sandy Springs. I am a practicing attorney in Brookhaven, but before I went to law school, I taught middle school. I taught 6th grade math and science, and so I know how incredibly valuable our school counselors are, and I leaned very heavily on my school counselors when I was teaching middle school. I'm very privileged to be able to serve on the Education Committee here in the Georgia House. This will be my 2nd term serving on that committee, and it is one of the most important committees as far as I'm concerned here because of the work that we do. The past year that we have all experienced together, 2020, has shown us that the work that you do each and every day has never been more vital. When you look at the impact of COVID and the coronavirus and just the general polarization of our society these days, school counselors are invaluable. And the work that you do must be supported, and we must do everything we can to make sure that we're helping you do your job. So I look forward to hearing all the ways that we can do that. And I look forward to continuing to fight for you and for our public schools on the Education Committee. Congratulations again on National School Counselor Week and welcome. Thank you for being here and for being engaged in your state government. It only works if all of you continue your engagement at the state level. So get to know your state representative, get to know your state senator, and this is a perfect first step. Thank you for being here.
Hello from the Georgia State Capitol and the Senate Committee on Education and Youth. My name is Chuck Payne, and it is my honor as Chairman of Education and Youth to recognize Georgia school counselors with such distinction. Having served as a state juvenile probation officer for 30 years of my life, I know firsthand the value of what our school counselors bring in support of student academic achievement and career and social and emotional development, ensuring they become the productive and well-adjusted adults of tomorrow. During the COVID pandemic, school counselors have been critical to addressing the widespread and unique challenges facing students, from ensuring access to remote learning resources to keeping high schoolers on track for graduation and post-secondary plans, to connecting students with resources like food and care. School counselors impact school climate and safety by promoting the inclusion of anti-bullying and violence prevention programs, school-wide positive behavior interventions and support, along with comprehensive conflict resolution programs to foster the maturity and growth of every child. Having worked side by side with you for the better part of my life, it is my honor as part of the Georgia School Council Association Day here at the Capitol, as part of National School Counseling Week, to simply say thank you. Thank you for all that you do to improve the lives of students of all backgrounds and from all regions of our state. Thank you and God bless you, and please keep making a difference in the lives of young people. We need you more today than ever before.
Greetings from your state capitol. Happy Georgia School Council Association Day. All 236 state legislators are just thrilled that you are taking time to visit with us and updating us on your priorities as well as priorities from your districts. As state legislators, our jobs are to first listen to constituents, and today you are our special constituents. We are to find solutions to your concerns and then work to solve your issues. The counseling profession is so very important in every school's climate. Your professions are important to our community's mental stability, its social alignment, and its physical well-being. Your professions fortify and solidify what is good and what is best for our children. In today's pandemic-induced economic crises, we need our school counselors more than ever. And going forward, we will rely heavily upon your professional expertise to achieve stabilization in schools, in family settings, in our economy, and throughout the woven fabric of this great state. We absolutely need you guys now, and we pray for your safety. We pray for your care as you take care of so many others. Thank you, and God bless you.
Well, good morning. This is State Representative Matthew Gamble, and I want to take this opportunity to welcome the Georgia School Counselors Association to your virtual day at the state capitol today. And I know that we all would love to be here in person, and I would love to be able to see you and reconnect with all my school counselor friends, but it's just not an option for us right now. But it will be here in the future, and I look forward to being back together in person with you very soon. I hope you're doing well. I want you to know that just seeing my counselor friends, I still so value the work that you do day in and day out in your school systems to work and support the needs of students. Now more than ever before, our students are dealing with issues that we never thought students would have to deal with, especially in light of the pandemic. And so I want you to know that I am very aware of the intensified situation that we have that you're dealing with. And so I'm doing what I can to discuss with my colleagues to make sure that we're attentive to the needs of school counselors as you manage the ongoing outcome from what the pandemic has done and will do to mental health of students and how that translates in our communities and in our school systems. So please know that I'm very aware of that and want to hear from you on the things that you're doing and having to deal with that go even above and beyond all the other stuff that you already do on a day in, day out basis. Keeping school counselor ratios low or as low as possible. And I know we've worked very hard to get our ratios to the national recommendation. And I know that we still have a lot of work left to do on that in many school systems, but we've at least recognized and funded it at the state level. And that's something that I want to continue to make sure we focus on and work together to try to get the school systems themselves to implement those ratios if at all possible. So I know there's much work left to be done on that as well. And then just continuing to keep the dialogue going between your association and us. And I want to compliment Nelson Mullins and your team that works so hard on your behalf. They are powerful advocates here at the state capitol, and I work very closely with them and have such appreciation for them each individually and respect for the work that they do. So I thank them for giving me the opportunity to do this Zoom call with you this morning. But as always, I miss you. I hope you are doing well and making it through this pandemic situation. I'm doing okay. I have added a few extra committees to my responsibilities here in the second term at the state capitol. I'm now on the Natural Resources Committee and Human Relations and Aging. And I've also assumed vice chair of the Economic Development and Tourism Committee. So I'm excited about that. But I still have a strong passion for school counseling and public education. And so I'm appreciative for the time I spent working with you guys and the time I spent working with career technical and ag education. So as always, my cell phone number is still the same, 770-655-0046. And call me, text me anytime, and let me know if there's things that we can work together on because I do value the work that school counselors do across the state. God bless you. Good to be with you today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your programming for your day at the state capitol.
And we want to thank all of the legislators who took time out of their very busy day to do those recordings for us. And for the newbies, Matthew Gamble was the GSCA lobbyist prior to Nelson Mullins coming on with us. He ran for a House seat up in Cartersville and won that. And he was also, I believe, the executive director over the Georgia Association of Career Technology Education, and has stepped down from that when he won that House seat. So we are appreciative of all of our legislators who brought greetings to us and their kind words to us. And I hope you can see that they do understand your role and how essential you are, and not only the academic and career counseling, but also the social emotional, addressing the social emotional needs of our kids and what lies ahead when our students begin to return to us face to face. So now I would like to turn the next part of this over to George Ray and Helen Sloat from Nelson Mullins, who are absolutely our heroes in working with school counseling there and championing our cause to bring a legislative update to you. So take it away, friends.
Well, thanks for having us today, Jennifer, Gail, Jennifer, and Kirby. We're so excited to be able to be with you virtually, and even our team is split among the Atlanta area. So we have some folks here in your state capitol reporting live, and Helen from our mothership office monitoring things remotely. But Helen, Stan Jones is on the call too as well, and Sam Martique. We're always pleased to be with you and thankful for the opportunity to work with the association and representing you down here at the state capitol. So what we want to do this morning is give you sort of just an overview of where the legislature is and what's going on down here before you kick over to some advocacy training, and for your advocacy chairs to then talk to you about how you can put that to work in advocating for your profession. So our part will be mostly a status update and an overview of what's happening down here before turning over to those pieces. So Helen and I will tag team back and forth, but just sort of start with a quick overview of where we are in the session. As you may or may not know, the legislature meets for 40 legislative days a year. It can be spread out over 40 immediate days or over 3 months or 6 months. Last year, we saw it spread all the way to June. But we're at day 11 of that 40-day legislative session. So just through the first quarter, making the round around first base. So lots going on down here. Budgets are in play, legislation is in play, and we also have a lot still in the wings waiting to come. So Helen, do you want to give any sort of overview of the session before I hop into budget and bills?
Sure. I would just say that, we have some new faces under the Gold Dome this year. There are 26 new members in the House, and there are 10 new members in the State Senate. So the complexion of both bodies looks slightly different, and that's why there are a number of new members on various committees. And you heard Representative Gamble talk about his new committee assignments. So each of them has a new set of committees that they're having to follow. So we're trying to get to know the new members and trying to understand what the new committee chairs, priorities are for this session. For instance, there's a new committee chair in the State Senate Education Committee, that's Chuck Payne. There's also a new House committee chair this year, that's Matt Dobnik. And so we're trying to understand everybody's roles as they roll forward here. So I would say a couple of things about items of interest that you all will be concerned about. I know you've been reading in the news about the $1,000 supplement for your salaries. We have been working, of course, closely with the Department of Education to try to understand more about who actually is eligible for those supplements. We also understand now that the Board of Education will vote on this proposal on February the 18th. So we're keeping a close eye on the supplement. We don't anticipate any adverse reaction or adverse happening as it relates to school counselors, So we'll keep you posted as that moves along. And I also would like to just mention briefly that you'll remember a couple of years ago, the governor set up Georgia Behavioral Health Reform and Innovation Commission. That is to look at mental health services across our state, in particular children's mental health services. The commission has just released its first set of recommendations. Those recommendations were released earlier this week. We have shared those with your team at the Georgia School Counselor Association, so you all can access the actual full report. We anticipate some legislation to come from those recommendations, but we haven't seen anything yet specifically. Of course, we'll keep you posted as that moves along. So I know that Georgia's going to want to talk more about some specifics as it relates to the budget. We're in the posture of where we are almost finished with the FY21 amended budget, and now the House is beginning its work on the 2022 budget. But there are several big initiatives underway as it relates to school vouchers. There are raising the age for mandatory attendance at school, what telehealth looks like in the delivery of those services to students in the classroom. Then there's, of course, issues around school discipline. I know George is going to talk specifically about some of the bills that are moving along. So I'm going to kick this back to him, and we'll be here, of course, to answer questions. But I would say just one more thing. Congratulations on School Counseling Week. George, take it away.
Thanks, Helen. That's you stole some of my thunder with the $1,000 supplemental payments, but that's okay because I know that's really what's on a lot of folks' minds. And I see a question has popped up in the chat about how that will break down by districts. So just to speak quickly on that, we believe that the department is going to allocate those funds based on the annual employment reports that districts are submitting for all of their classified and unclassified staff and certificated staff. So that will be $1,000 for everyone who's at that school level personnel report, including school counselors, as far as we understand at this point. So that's a good thing. We'll, like Helen said, we'll keep monitoring it and hopefully have some action outside with the State Board of Education in the next few weeks. That's really the tipping point for that to happen because it's sort of outside of the regular state budget since it's being paid for with largely the federal CARES Act dollars. So good thing happening, and we'll keep an eye on it. So when we think about the issues that we work on down at the Capitol for you, we put them in two real buckets. One, budget issues, and then two, policy issues. So I want to talk a little bit about each of those and where they are and what's going on. Helen's already alluded to the budget, and that sort of comes in two different formats. One, in the amended budget, which is the current fiscal year we're in. So the state works on a fiscal year just like your districts from July 1 to June 30th. And in the spring, they come back and visit last year's what we call big budget and do an amended budget. So that's the budget that's being worked on right now in the legislature. The Senate is currently considering what their positions are. But to give you a taste of what's in there as of now, the biggest piece and really the biggest add across the budget is in the Quality Basic Education Formula, QBE, where the governor recommended and the House agreed with a restoration of about $567 million for the current year. So you'll recall last summer when the pandemic was really hot and heavy, not that it isn't now, there was widespread cuts across the state budget, including a between 9 and 10% cut to QBE. This $567 million restores about 60% of that cut. So a major infusion of cash if it makes it through the amended process that will help your districts deal with all the challenges you faced during the pandemic. And that in combination with federal CARES dollars that have been pushed down will hopefully provide enough resources to pay for PPE, for digital learning, for extra resources for teachers, counselors, staff, and students. So that's a good thing. Also, there are additional funds for CTAE education in the amended budget right now. We'll hope for those will keep pressing ahead. And then also of particular interest to counselors, there's additional funding included for advanced placement and TSAT exams. So those can be administered in the conclusion of the fiscal year here. So that's what we call the little budget, the amended budget for the current year. We're hopeful that will get out of the Senate later this week or early next week, and then be on to the reconciliation process, and then ultimately to the governor for his sign-off. We'll also begin working on the big budget for the coming fiscal year starting July 1 very soon. The governor's already released his recommendations on that, which also include restoration of the QBE funds, that $567 million. And we're also going to continue working on what is your number one budget priority, and that is fully funding the 1 to 450 school counselor ratio. We had good success with that last year, getting into the House version of the budget when it passed. But that, of course, was in February, just before the pandemic hit, and the major budget cuts had to be implemented to get us through the year. So we're continuing to work on that. We're making good inroads, and that's our primary budget work that we're doing for you right now. And I encourage you, as you think about or you go through the advocacy training coming ahead, and as you talk with the advocacy chairs, think about how you can let your legislators know how important fully funding the school counselor ratio is to you and the profession, and to the students that you serve, most importantly. So that's a quick budget. I do want to highlight just a few bills that are kicking around already. Obviously, we have 29 days remaining of the legislative session for bills to be introduced and discussed, and we're beginning the first of a 2-year session. So things that come in over the next 29 days will also be in play next year when we're down here doing work for you. So first, let me highlight the most exciting piece of legislation for school counselors, House Resolution 50, which is authored by the new House Education Chair, recognizing February 1st through 5th as National School Counseling Week. That was adopted last week, so it's a great recognition by the House of the work that you're doing out in the communities. And we'll have a pretty copy of that, what we call a pretty copy of that, to give to your leadership for display when we all gather in person again. So that's a great thing. As far as real substantive policy going on right now, there are several bills around the Hope Scholarship that have been offered by Representative Stacey Evans from Atlanta. You'll remember her as a candidate for the Democratic nomination for governor. She has run and won a seat back in the Georgia State House. So she has 3 bills relating to the Hope Scholarship. One, providing for individuals to access the Hope Scholarship after they matriculated to college if they weren't first eligible. One, to require that Hope grants actually equal the amount of tuition where they're used, and then also providing for eligibility for the Hope for remedial and developmental courses for individuals seeking an associate's degree at TCSG. So 3 bills that will be heavily discussed. We don't know about the prospects of them quite yet, but all around the Hope Scholarship, which you're advising students on and working with students who are hoping to get that at least high school level. Another bill that will affect particularly high school counselors and the way you're preparing students for post-secondary education is House Bill 120 by Representative Casey Carpenter of Dalton. And that would actually allow for non-immigrant aliens to be classified as in-state students for tuition purposes at the university system and technical college system of Georgia. So that's an interesting bipartisan bill that, again, we'll hotly debate and discuss, that we'll keep watch on and could affect the students that you serve. A couple other bills that are probably of interest. We have a pair of companion bills, one in the House, one in the Senate, House Bill 201 and Senate Bill 17, which are mirror images, but are entitled the Unlocking the Promise Whole Child School Model School Act. So it establishes a whole child model school program in Georgia. It's been a conversation piece down here for the last couple years and among the education advocates to provide those wraparound type services and a model that supports wraparound services for students in your schools. So we will see if those progress, but the conversation continues on them, and it's likely that we might see something out of that. The last bill I'll highlight for you, which is interesting particularly to you as employees who are serving your schools, and that is House Bill 146 by Representative Houston Gaines, which would provide for 3 weeks of parental or adoptive leave for teachers working for local school districts. It covers all state employees, but also covers local district employees to provide for that parental leave for individuals who would like to seek it. So that bill was introduced late last year and got hung up by the pandemic, but Representative Gaines has brought it back again with a bipartisan authorship list, and it's likely to see favorable consideration in the House. We'll see how it goes in the Senate. So those are just a few highlights of legislation that is kicking around right now. Helen, is there anything else you'd like to mention?
And George, why don't you talk just a little bit about the special needs scholarship that's been popped up in the chat, and you might want to talk about Senator Mullis's discipline bill that has been in committee and will be in committee again today.
Sure, and Helen, if you'll remind me of the number in just a minute of Senator Mullis's bill, I can talk about House Bill 60 and Senate Bill 47, I believe is its number. So for those of you who've monitored the legislature over the last several years, there have been efforts in both chambers to expand scholarship accounts, vouchers. There are a lot of different words for them. Essentially, the ability of individual families and students to take their public education dollars that are going into school districts and apply them toward private educational options, be it for special needs or for just a variety of different reasons. There are 2 bills right now kicking around, House Bill 60 by Representative Wes Cantrell and Senate Bill 47 by Senator Steve Gooch. Representative Cantrell's bill actually creates a educational savings account that would allow students to take their state education dollars and put them into an account that could then be used at private school, at online learning opportunities, and then also any additional money at the end of once the student graduates can be taken on to post-secondary schools. That bill is in the House Education Committee right now, and it's a topic of hot discussion, as you might imagine, but it has not been acted on at this point. The Senate version is actually an expansion of the existing special needs scholarship, which you probably are aware of, which allows students who have one of 11 different qualifying conditions to similarly take state education funding to a private educational option. The bill that's being proposed would expand that list quite substantially and provide the opportunity for a lot more students to take advantage of it. It too is in its chamber's version of the Education Committee. It's called the Education and Youth Committee in the Senate, but no action has been taken on that quite yet. We expect that those bills will move, and we're working along with education advocates in the Capitol to address them as best we can. So those are those two. I call them voucher bills because that's what they are for me. But Helen also mentioned the bill by Senator Mullis, which is number
Senate Bill 42.
Helen?
Senate Bill 42.
Senate Bill 42, which as drafted would remove student discipline from the star ranking that schools get for climate. That was a bill that was discussed in committee 2 days ago and is of particular interest. We'll probably be back up in committee this afternoon about whether that factor should be included in star rankings or whether it should just be made available to the public so they can look at it. There's some concern about whether schools underutilize discipline to affect rankings and whether it would be helpful to systems or to individual schools to be able to manage their discipline without fear that it's going to tank a rating that gets reported widely. So that's a lot of legislation to digest. One thing I'll mention, and I keep reiterating this because it is important to note, that bills can be introduced at any time. So they can be introduced today, they can be introduced on day 40, particularly in a 2-year session that we're just beginning. So keep tabs on what your advocacy chairs are sharing with you as we go along here, because new bills do pop up and bills change. So it's an ever evolving environment that we work in. And we appreciate your support as you advocate for your profession. There's going to be some, I'm going to say great training because Helen and I recorded it for you, but there'll be some good tidbits for you to begin working as advocates of your own profession, because as much as we enjoy representing you here at the Capitol and working for you, you are often your best advocates in your district talking to your local legislators. And we appreciate every bit of assistance you can give us as we help tell your story here at the Capitol. So with that, unless Helen's got anything else.
So I would just mention one thing. I know that all of you all have been struggling with your students across the state since the pandemic started, and especially those in the virtual learning space. Yesterday, there was a lengthy discussion on broadband in the state Senate in one of the committees. So we anticipate that the legislature will do something in more this session to try to expand broadband services statewide. And the actual budget for both the amended and the big budget, the governor's put in a total of $30 million to help address broadband issues statewide. So we'll keep you posted on that. I know that that will be a big help if you all have to continue with this virtual learning process as we're under now in many areas of the state due to the pandemic, but it also will help with the delivery of telehealth services as well. So with that, I'm going to send this back to Gail. I think she's going to now kick off your actual training moment.
I try to be so professional and mute and then don't unmute. Thank you, George and Helen, for that update on legislation that you guys are watching for us. And they do send us regular updates. And when it pertains to school counseling, especially things we feel like you need to know, we do push that information out to you. So I would encourage you over the next couple of dozen days until the session ends that you keep an eye on your email, that you watch for email blasts from GSCA, especially if we can get the funding for our lower ratios added back into the big budget. We may be doing some call to action, and we'll need you to really help us out with that. So and the training that we are about to view that George and Helen created for you will give you more detail about how to advocate at the local and the state level. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start that training video. Thank you guys for being here. Our numbers are increasing. We're up to 140 now.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for this special session on legislative advocacy. My name is George Ray, and I'm joined with my colleague Helen Sloat, and we're from the law firm of Nelson Mullins. We are pleased and excited to represent the Georgia School Counselor Association at the state capitol, and we're delighted to be with you here today to talk a little bit about how you can join in our efforts to advocate for the profession of school counseling. So as we get started in the session, we want to talk with you a little bit about first, why advocate? We're going to have a little schoolhouse rock session talking about how you advocate or how the process works. And then we're going to launch into some ways that you can tangibly get involved in advocating for your profession and for the students that you serve. So to get started, let's talk about why advocate at all. First, because it's important, as you know, to secure additional funding and resources for your profession. You've seen over the last few years that educators received a salary increase in the first year of Governor Kemp's administration that was well received. Counselors were included in that thanks to the advocacy of our team and so many of you out there who reached out to your legislators. It's also important for new programmatic funding, so funds that help you deploy new curriculum, new services in your schools. That comes from the state budget, and it comes from your advocacy on behalf of it. And now, in this moment, as we record this seminar, we're in the middle of the pandemic and preparing to emerge from it and deal with the budget reductions that were faced in fiscal year 21. Your advocacy for additional funding is so important right now to ensure that when funds are available, that they are committed back to education and back to school counseling. So in addition to advocating for funding, it's important to be an advocate for unfounded and unfunded mandates. Nobody likes laws that get forced upon them that they don't have input in and they don't have the opportunity to provide feedback for. So it's important that you join us as advocates for your profession so that we can let legislators know as they're considering legislation how it really affects the work you do and the students you serve. And then finally, a third reason for advocating is for promoting policy for your profession. There's obviously great policies that are developed on the national level and here at the state level to support the good work that you do in your schools around the state. And we look at things like the comprehensive model of school counseling, counselor keys, evaluation system, and other initiatives that can support the work you're doing. And it's important to let legislators and let policymakers know that you're interested in those things and that they will help your profession. So you are your best advocates for your profession. We're at the Capitol every day supporting you, but as we talk to your local legislators, they love to hear from you because you're their voters and you're their community members. So it's important that you join us in these advocacy roles so that we can help secure these legislative outcomes for you. So that's a reason why you advocate. Let's take a step back and have the little bit of a schoolhouse rock section where we talk about when to advocate and sort of how the process works. And I'm going to kick it over to my colleague, Helen, who's here with us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting us come and talk with you a little bit about advocacy today. So as George said, we want to talk about where do bills come from? Well, they come from a variety of places. And many times what happens is a legislator will be approached about a new idea or maybe even an existing law that's on the books now that sometimes are problematic for their constituents. So the constituent may contact the legislator and explain their own personal experiences with a law or the lack of a law and ask if something may be done about it. So the legislator will then kind of mull it over, think about it, and then decide whether he or she would like to try to actually tackle that particular idea or proposal. So almost everything that comes before the General Assembly is personal at some level, or it's driven perhaps by a federal initiative that may come down from our federal government, which would require our state law to be amended. So everything has usually a reason behind it. And so when a legislator is contacted by that constituent or perhaps the department or governor about, the need for a law to be changed, there's usually some rationale behind it. But remember, everything is about politics is personal at some level. So once the bills are, conceptually designed and the legislator then maybe writes out some notes, then he or she will contact legislative counsel. And those legislators will then go meet with legislative counsel, explain the idea and the concept that they're trying to address. And they then will have legislative counsel draw up an actual bill. So, and then the legislator will take that bill and that idea and will introduce it. And we should keep in mind that almost all bills will, generate from the body in which the legislator sits in terms of, like, if it's going to be an education bill, then that can be generated in either the House or the Senate. But if it's a bill that involves revenue, then that bill always has to start in the House. So George had asked me to talk to you a little bit about the mechanics of what a piece of legislation actually looks like. So we have up on your screen here, House Bill 700, which is a bill that was introduced by Representative Epps. And if you will note up in the upper right-hand corner, I mentioned a moment ago about the fact that the legislator has taken an idea to legislative counsel. So Representative Epps has taken his idea to legislative counsel, and this is what we call the LC number. The LC number is a designated number by that legislative council person who's actually assigning the number to the actual proposal. So this will kind of allow him or her to track the drafts as they move through the system. So then you will see at line 1, this is what we call the preamble of the legislation. And that sort of gives an overview of what the legislation is about, what it's attempting to accomplish. And in this particular bill, you can see it's written in Title 49. And as you know, our Georgia laws are divided up in various titles based on subject matter. So this happens to be addressing Medicaid and children's intervention services. So if you'll kind of skip down a little ways, you'll see we have section 1. This is where the bill actually starts to make changes in the actual code, in actual Title 49. And you'll see at line 11, that outlines the actual section number that's being changed in this particular proposal. And then at line 13, you're going to start to see language that's underlined. So when language is underlined in a bill, that means it is new to the proposal. So that means they're inserting language to accomplish what the goal of the legislation is attempting to do. So then if you will look further, you will see it has to have renumbering done. So you will see at line 15 where the number 1 is stricken, and then now that language becomes number 2. And so all the new language that you see in this proposal will actually be underlined, and it's, as you can run through the various sections. So each time a code section is changed, you typically will have a new section in the actual legislation. For this instance, is like section 2 is another area of the code. It's 169.2 rather than 169.1, which was in section 1. So if you will kind of skip over to towards the end of the legislation, at section 4, that instructs that all the laws in existence and any parts of law that are in existence that might be in conflict with this idea that this Representative Epps has proposed has to be repealed. But note that there is no language in this legislation which instructs when it actually becomes law. Our General Assembly works on the premise that a piece of law becomes actual law if passed by both the House and the Senate and signed by the governor on July 1, which is our state's new fiscal year. And if the bill is silent and does not state a specific effective date, then that legislation becomes effective on July 1. If a bill has specific language in it, which does occur pretty frequently, then you can actually indicate when you want that bill to become effective. For instance, it could say this legislation becomes effective on May 1, 2021, or it could be a date in the future, April 1, 2022. So it just depends on what the legislator is trying to do. Some of that is driven by federal law because it might include federal funding. And as we know, our federal fiscal year is much different than our state's fiscal year. So George, I think that covers most of our components of the bill. If you think that we need to add or anything further, please jump in here and help me out.
No, absolutely, Helen. Thank you for covering all of that. And as you can tell already, legislation is a process. And as Helen outlined, just sort of the point from idea generation or idea creation to drafting of the bill, we've already gone through a long process, but it's just the beginning. And this is where we get into the real schoolhouse rock for us, harking back to those cartoons that we think about, I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill and moving through the process. What you're looking at now is that process. So Helen has talked through legislators taking ideas from constituents to the legislative council, the bill or resolution being drafted and introduced. And this is where we jump into the real consideration of a bill. Once it's been drafted, once it's ready to go, it gets dropped in a place called the hopper. And both the House and the Senate has a hopper, and the legislator, either a state senator, takes it to the Secretary of the Senate, or a member of the House of Representatives takes it to the Clerk of the House, and they drop the bill in the hopper. And that's where we're really off to the races. So from that point, the bill gets assigned to a committee and gets to go for its consideration. So a lot of the bills that affect school counseling obviously go to the House Education Committee and the Senate Education and Youth Committee. But there are also bills that affect education that affect school counseling that go elsewhere, like the retirement committees, where bills relating to the teachers' retirement system go, or bills relating to child welfare that may go to the House Juvenile Justice Committee or Judiciary Committees even. So you have to keep your eyes open as the process proceeds and look for bills not just in the education sort of pathway, but also in some of those others. After that bill is assigned, bill or resolution is assigned to a committee, that's where the real work, the real legislative sort of meat making or sausage making happens. There'll be committee hearings where individuals like you will be invited to come and testify on a bill, where legislators will debate changes to a bill that's dropped, and where ultimately they will vote to either send the bill on to the Rules Committee, or they will decide to take no action on the bill or even vote it down. So there's a lot of action that happens at the committee level and can happen, in relative short order. So the ultimate goal, obviously, to get your bill out of committee. And once that happens, once there's a positive vote in the committee, it goes to what is called the Rules Committee. And the Rules Committee primary purpose is to decide which of the bills that come out of the committee process get to go ultimately to a floor vote in the House or Senate. So you have to convince the members of the Rules Committee that this is good legislation, that's good policy for the state, and get it assigned to a rules calendar where you ultimately get it to the floor of the House or Senate, where, again, there's debate. There's no more testimony like you had in committee, but legislators will get up in the well down at the front of each chamber and talk about the bill in favor, against, agnostic to it, ultimately leading up to that moment of the floor vote where you're hopeful for favorable passage out of the chamber, which you begin. So that brings us all the way around to this green box, because you've run the gauntlet, you've made it through committee, you made it through Rules Committee, you made it through the floor, and guess what? You got to do it all over again. So almost every bill and bills that go into law, legislation that goes into law, has to go through both chambers. So if you start in the House and you get through a House vote favorably, you go to the Senate, get assigned to a committee, pass out a committee, go to the Rules Committee, and then go back to the Senate floor for a vote. So you got to do all that again. Now, the hope is you make it through both chambers without any changes in the second chamber. But sometimes you wind up with changes in the second chamber, and that opens a whole nother process that requires legislators in the original chamber to either agree to the changes or insist on their original version or have a conference committee to work it out. A whole another collection of steps that may be required. At the end of the day, you hope you get your bill through either with no changes in the second chamber, so it's passed in the same form in both chambers, or that you make it through the reconciliation process where the same bill is approved by both chambers. And that brings you to the last blue box, and that is off to the governor for his or her consideration and hopefully signing. So the governor can take three actions with bills. They can sign the bill and put it into law on the effective date, either the one that's specified in the bill, as Helen mentioned, or on July 1 of the year that it's passed. The governor can veto the bill, obviously, and send it back to the legislature where they can override the veto either during the session or in the following session. Or the governor can wait and allow the bill to go into law without any action. So ultimately, you want the governor to sign your bill, but most of all, you want to make sure there's not a veto. And at the end of the day, you want your bill to become law and let it take effect. So you're probably wondering, why are we going through this civics lesson? Why are we doing the Schoolhouse Rock thing with you? This is not a civics class. It's important to know that this process is long and with many steps, because each step in the process is an opportunity for you to advocate. It's an opportunity for you to influence the process. You can influence whether a committee makes changes or passes a bill. You can influence whether the Rules Committee puts a bill on the calendar or not. You can influence how legislators vote in a floor vote. And each one of those points is an opportunity for you to reach out and make an impact. So we talked about, why it's important to advocate, the process of the legislature, and when you can advocate. Let's talk a little bit about how to advocate. Helen, why don't you take them through about how to get to know their legislators?
Sure, but before we, I guess, move to that point, I'd like to just add one thing to what George just talked about the various touch points. We all need to keep in mind that the legislative session is 40 days in length. So you've got the regular 40 days that the legislators are actually in session. And then the governor has actually another 40 days within which he can or she could actually review this legislation and make a decision as to whether or not to sign or veto the bill. So that needs to be kept in mind in your advocacy efforts. So how do you go about finding and getting to know your legislators? Well, one great way is you can actually identify your legislators by looking at open states. And you can go on that website that we've given you the link for, and you can identify who your legislators are through that. You can locate your legislators once you've identified who those individuals are by going on to the legislative website, which we've also provided you the link for that legislative website. I might also add that many of the larger counties have some information on the actual elected officials on their own websites, and you can also find some information about them on those websites as well, if you would like. So before you get to the point where you actually want to reach out to get to know your legislators, I would highly recommend that you Google them. Look on Facebook, check Instagram, to see if they're on LinkedIn or if they have a Twitter account, or even look to see what their campaign websites may have included on them. Each of them has a lot of information out there, but there's also information on the legislators and the legislative website. They have biographies on each of the elected officials at the state level. So you can find out a lot of information about them through those documents as well. So it's really critical that you research and get to know these folks before you actually reach out to them, because that way it can help you be better informed as to how you further your communications. George, you want to move us along here?
No, absolutely. We're not recommending that you social media stalk, but we're recommending that you social media stalk. Legislators are people too, and they like to know who they're interacting with, and just like you like to know who you're interacting with. So once you find your legislators, the question is, okay, well, how am I going to make a connection? So it's really simple, because you live in their districts. And we use that as a mnemonic for the different ways that you can reach out. So the first L is letter. It is amazing how effective the written word still is in the legislative setting. In a world of digital communications and Facebook Messenger and emails and Instagram, the physical on paper correspondence is underused, and we can't overstate the value of sending those and reaching out to your legislators that way. It's one of our favorite ways, one of our primary ways of letting legislators know where we stand and what's going on, because it's something tangible they can hold on to. So when you're sending those letters, you can send it to two different places. One, during the legislative session, which is generally January to March or April, you can send it to their address in Atlanta at the Capitol. And you can find that at the websites that Helen pointed out just a few minutes ago. Outside of session, and even during session, because a lot go home during the weekend, you can also send notes to their district address. Again, those are located on the website, on the legislative website that Helen was talking about. So after a letter, the next sort of best way to reach out in our mind is inviting a legislator to do something, to see something, to come to your school, to see what you're doing in your schools and how you're working with your students. This is best done outside of the session, of course, since they have more time and are in the district every day. So we're thinking sort of summer into the fall. But don't hesitate to reach out in a letter even, and as part of your messaging to those legislators, invite them to come to your school, invite them to come see what's happening where you're working and serving students. Alternatively, and during the session even, you can also visit. This is a little bit more difficult in pandemic times, but it is an option that's still available and is generally a great option during non-pandemic times. But come to the Capitol and visit a legislator during session. Reach out to their administrative assistant, also on the website Helen talked about, or reach out to them directly and say, hey, I'm a constituent. I'd love to come talk with you about, what I'm seeing in the community and my work as a school counselor. And, 9 times out of 10, they'll be happy to visit with you. You can also do this in the district outside of session. Georgia has a citizen legislature with legislators who are coming from all different walks of life. You have lawyers, doctors, pharmacists, farmers, business people, insurance agents, who are all working in your community. And one thing that we do as professional lobbyists is come to your communities and visit with legislators in their places of work and where they live. You can do that too, particularly since you live there. Just a matter of reaching out. And then finally, the E is email, the big bad sort of, if you can't do anything else, send an email. Some communication is better than no communication at all. And sometimes urgency does require you to send the electronic message. And we'll talk a little bit more about how you can do that effectively. But one initial tip is send messages to both legislative and campaign email addresses. So if you look on the legislative website that Helen talked about, you'll find their legislative email address. Certainly use that. But if you Google the legislators, you'll often find their campaign websites as well. And sometimes they check their campaign email addresses a little more frequently than their state addresses. So if you're going to send the email, send it to both and do it that way. So once you sort of have the ways you want to reach out or know the ways to reach out, Helen, why don't you talk a little about I forgot to talk about social media. You can reach out on social media. That's also an option. Helen, why don't you talk about a little bit about what your messages should contain?
So sure, George. So I would also just back up and say one more thing about when you send an email to the lawmaker at his or her legislative address. On the legislative website, they actually have the name of their administrative assistant. I would highly recommend that you copy the administrative assistant on any electronic mail communication that you might send, because that might ensure a little greater likelihood that they will actually receive the message, because they get hundreds and hundreds of messages on a daily basis sometimes, especially during the session. So as George said, let's talk a little bit about what your messages contain. Well, first of all, don't ever use a form letter or message to be sent to a lawmaker. That is like the death knell. They will typically put those immediately in what we call the round file or the trash bin. So you need to be really original in your messaging. While it might be useful for your association to maybe draft up some talking points for each of you to follow, you should make certain that you, take those talking points, but make them your own messages. So be direct and be succinct when you craft your message. And by all means, make it personal. When you make it personal, you give a spin on the issue, that how this issue actually impacts you or your students. And that's really important that you try to get that message across when you start to send messages to lawmakers. And finally, I would say, present the facts, present data, because they don't want just anecdotal information. They want to see what the numbers might say or what the facts on something might be. And if you need to make quotations, then make quotations in terms of giving them some ideas and information that they can take and use as they determine whether or not they want to support or oppose a particular proposal that you're asking them to help with. So George, I think those are the bigger points on our messaging, that I will let you go on and take us to the next step.
Yeah, sure, Helen. And I want to throw two of my own things onto this, on the messaging piece too, because they're important and easily missed, particularly when those of our folks we work with out in the community sort of reach out. But one is to make your ask. So as Helen was talking about, it's important to lay out the facts and data when you're making an argument or making sort of a point to a legislator. It's also important that you ask them to do what you want to do. And if it's provide a particular bucket of funding, ask for that funding. Or if it's to support or oppose a particular bill, ask them to do that with that particular bill. It's important to make clear sort of what you want, so there's no question of what you want. And then finally, the most important thing you can say in any message, in any conversation with a legislator or a policymaker is thank you. These are individuals who, again, have jobs in their community. They don't get paid a ransom to come to the Capitol. I think it's now like $17,000 a year. So, not much. They're taking time out of their careers and their lives at home to serve in Atlanta. And it's important that no matter how legislators are coming out on our particular issues, we acknowledge that they are serving the state and serving their constituents, again, before, after, and in between. So now the question is, how do you get started? What next? Well, you can always say thank you. We just talked about that, and that's a great way to get started. If you haven't met your legislator yet, or you don't know who they are, you don't already have a relationship, a great way to start is by an introduction and saying thank you for your service. So as we conclude our session today, that's sort of our takeaway for you. If there's one thing you can do when you log off the session, take a look, find your legislators in open states that Helen pointed out, find their appropriate addresses on the legislative website, and write them a quick note that says thank you for your service. If you're watching this in early 2020 or 2021 as we record this, or early part of any year, the legislators are in session right now, or preparing to be in session, and it's a great time to just reach out and say hello and thank you. Soon enough, we'll be asking for particular things, and you'll have an opportunity to do that and be a part of that. But it's always nice to start the conversation, start the relationship with a note of appreciation or a word of appreciation for what they're doing. So with that, unless Helen has something to wrap us up, I'll throw up our beautiful mugs as if you can't already see us here. This is our Nelson Mullins team, and we're, again, delighted to work with the association and with so many of you down at the Capitol, and invite you to reach out with any questions that we might be able to answer, and wish you best of luck as you help us advocate for your profession. Anything else for you, Helen?
Great, thanks a lot, George. No, not really, except to say we do actually publish a daily legislative report during the session. It's the Gold Dome report, and your association has access to that report. So that is one great way to kind of keep up with the activities that are going on during the legislative session. Of course, you can always pick up the media input from your local media outlets to try to keep track of what's happening as well.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, and good luck out there, everyone.
Bye-bye.
All right, so I know that video was probably helpful to lots of you on this call, because I was also taking notes about some of the things that they were saying. So George and Helen, thank you for that. That really was great. That was a really well-rounded kind of training about how we can advocate to our legislators. So we're going to move to the next portion of our little show. We have another recorded video of school counselors from around the state. I'm very proud of this video because a student that is a high school student in my cluster that I've known since kindergarten, who has a passion for videography and video production, was able to put this together for us. So it's really, really great. And I love that, as school counselors, we try to find ways to support our students. And in this video, it really is going to talk to you about, some of the things that our legislators earlier said. Representative Wilson said, get engaged in your state government. Helen and George just talked about that, and making sure that you know who is in your state government and who are your representatives. Senator Payne said, right now we're needed more than ever. And right now we all need your voices more than ever to speak up to our legislators. Freddie Sims said, they rely on our expertise, and they need to hear what we have to say. And then Matthew Gamble gave us all his phone number. because he means it and they all mean it. They really want to hear from us. So without further ado, I think we'll get our video started so you can hear from some school counselors from around the state. Thanks so much.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Diaz. I am a school counselor at Lanier Middle School, and I also have been a part of the Georgia School Counselors Association Advocacy Committee for 6 or 7 years. We all know that advocacy for our students is really important at the individual level, and that might mean advocating to a principal, to our administration, to teachers, or to parents for our students, or maybe even groups of students. But this video, we really hope will encourage school counselors in our state to get active in public arena advocacy. This is where we get outside of our building, outside of our comfort zones, and we talk to, maybe it's elected officials, maybe it's the school board, maybe it's the local city council, maybe it's our Georgia House of Representatives, or even our senators. And these are folks that make decisions for our students that impact what we do and impact their lives. This is important because we know that the history of our profession really has come out of legislation. In the early 1900s, our country's priorities were really about economic growth and national security. So there was a big focus on career development and vocational guidance. And I know I'm going to use the G word in this. But we moved to 1956, and it was the National Education Defense Act. And in this act, they were really talking about career guidance, career development in science and engineering areas. Then we moved to 1963, and we have the Vocational Education Act. This is the first time that federal funds were dedicated to career guidance. And that went for career guidance programs, it went for guidance counselors, it went for guidance supervisors. So these things were important.
When asked about advocacy and why it's important, my immediate response is, well, why not? Advocacy is the medium through which change can take place, not only at the local level, but also at the state and national levels. But advocacy is very dear to my heart because it wasn't so long ago when I was the only full-time school counselor at my school. I shared my time with a colleague who was divided across schools. And so my colleague's responsibility was about 100 students at my school, plus a whole other building. It was very difficult for my colleague to maneuver across buildings. However, that inevitably left me with the bulk of the work, especially in their absence. Needless to say, I felt like I was not serving my students appropriately or meeting their needs. And as a result, I took it upon myself to ramp. And through that process, I was able to collaborate with stakeholders and decision makers, which led to a great change in my school. We ended up securing a second full-time school counselor. And our students and our families were able to get the service and the care and the effectiveness that they needed. And that's the beauty of advocacy. It has the power to change things. It has the power to move things forward.
When I first started, our school counselor to student ratio was almost 750 to 1. And we couldn't do a lot of the individual and group counseling and things we wanted to do with our students. So how did we change that? We hired a lobbyist. We started to advocate for ourselves. We started to educate our superintendents, our principals, our legislators on what school counselors do and how vital they are to our school environment, how vital they are to helping our students have emotional and social and behavioral support within the academic community. I know that a lot of people don't like to reach out and say what they do and toot your own horn, but you have to get a place at the table. And the way you do that is to advocate, is to go to the Capitol, is to talk to legislators and tell them what we do and how we make a difference. I'm going to encourage you to jump out of your comfort zone and talk about all the wonderful things you are able to do for your students, your parents, and your schools.
As school counselors, we know that it's important to make sure that we speak up because it's part of our national standards and competencies and even our ethical standards to make sure that we're advocates for our students, and not just advocates on an individual level, but we need to be social justice advocates so that we're speaking up for things that our students are experiencing, societal pressures, and what's going on in the world today. So it's our job to make sure that we're speaking up for students.
Advocacy at the local level has a certain tone and look to it. When we think of advocacy at the local level, that is if a student is going through any kind of social, emotional, it could be a home situation, it could be a situation where a student is going through academic situation, and being able to advocate and speak on behalf of that student on the micro level. It could be a student who is struggling in math. And being that person that would intercede for that student, speaking to their teachers, speaking to their parents, and being able to work along with them and build that relationship to help them be successful. That's advocacy at the micro level. There's also advocacy at the macro level. And that is where, as counselors, it is extremely important to see the work that we do as social justice advocates, to see the work that we do as beyond the school building, right? It's not only in the local school, it's not only in the classrooms, but what happens to our students' home life? What happens to our student community? What is happening in their state? What are those laws and things that are happening? What are those societal norms, those society ills perhaps, that are going on that is causing a backlash? It could be causing a heartache for our students. So at that macro level, it really pushes us as counselors to sometimes get outside of our comfort zone, get outside of our offices, get outside of our school building, and go to the local governmental offices and speak to the mayors, and go to state capitol buildings and be able to lobby for changes that would directly affect the students that we work with. So advocacy indeed looks different in those two spheres, at the micro level as well as at the macro level.
So I know as school counselors, when we talk about advocacy, especially at the state level, that can sound really daunting because we're talking to legislators, and it can also put us in a place where we feel like we're not sure exactly what we're supposed to say or how to say it. But I have had the experience of talking to individual legislators as well as in our state capitol on the floor with the House of Representatives. And what I've learned from that is that they are absolutely interested in how they can support us as educators. They want to know what school counselors do, how we make an impact on students, what we need from them. And we all know how to talk about that. We know our positions, we know our roles as school counselors, we know what our students in our schools are experiencing, and that's what they want to know from us. And they want to know how they can help. Every legislator that I've talked to, regardless of political parties, has been extremely kind and supportive and open to further conversations, open to coming to the school and supporting the whole school and the counseling program, and meeting with our counseling team, our administrative team, and finding out exactly what is happening on a daily basis in our schools and what supports we need from them at the state level.
I recently finished my dissertation, and during this study, I actually was able to interview school counselor advocates, school counselors that are working in the public arena level from all over the country. Through my research, the data really revealed several themes that came up for these school counselors that are doing this work. The first theme really was a legislative learning curve. And that means that school counselors have to learn how to function within the world of legislation. We have to learn how to read legislation. We have to learn how it's written. We have to learn the policies and the procedures. Sometimes it happens really quickly. Sometimes it takes multiple years for policy to be written, for legislation to be written. It's important for us to know who the legislators are, which legislators are important, why are they important, what's important to them, so that we know how to speak to them, so that they'll hear our message. That's a hard thing to learn, and it feels like a massive amount of information for school counselors to have to learn, because that's just not part of our normal school day. But it is something that we can do. Over time, school counselors that do this work really start to build confidence in their abilities. One, because you realize, I'm just talking about being a school counselor. I'm talking about what I do every day. And that's something that we can easily talk about. One of the other things that happens is that school counselors figure out that these legislators are just human beings, just like us. And they actually want to hear our voice. They want to hear our expertise. They want to know what we know about students and what their students are experiencing in their constituencies. They want to know from us what we have to tell them.
What does advocacy look like outside of the school building is being able to be bold and standing up for things that maybe you thought at first that it doesn't really fit our role, but going down, looking inside of you and thinking, why did I choose this profession? Was I trained to be a guidance counselor, and have I evolved into the school counseling role of how everything that goes around with a student affects them? So how do we advocate that outside of the school building? Is staying informed, educating yourself, meeting people, being okay to reach out and to people that you may not be comfortable with at first, but just getting to know people. And I'm big on relationship building, whether it be inside or outside of the school building.
School counselors are trained with counseling skills, but I don't think a lot of school counselors think about the fact that their counseling skills translate to advocacy work, including legislative advocacy work. A lot of the work that goes into legislative advocacy in particular is about relationship building. And that includes not only conversations that you might have with legislators, but it can be conversations that you have with school board members, community policymakers, things like that. And really those kind of officials and lawmakers want to build relationships with their constituents. And that's something that school counselors are really good at, is being able to express the concerns of the stakeholders that they work with, being able to engage in a conversation that's deep and that's meaningful, because they have those active listening skills that make them very present in a conversation. And I think a lot of school counselors underestimate the significance of those kinds of listening skills that they have, and how that translates to being able to really connect with legislators, and that's really important.
So I became involved with GSCA in the advocacy position, and I work with legislators to address our ratios, our funding, and our programming. And there were times that I felt like no one was listening, that we would go to the Capitol, talk to legislators, and sometimes I felt like they just didn't understand or perhaps appreciate what we were talking about. But over the years, we built relationships with legislators that later on became very instrumental in getting our ratios lowered to 1 to 450, because they were higher at that time. And that was a huge success for us, for legislators to listen, to understand, and to see the benefit of the role of the school counselor in lowering those ratios. So that work paid off, but we still had a lot of work to do.
One of the things my participants really experienced is the experience of working collectively with other people. Once you get involved with your state organization, once you get involved with other counselors, it becomes this beautiful thing where you get to know people that really feel the same way that you do about schools, about students, and about our work. So it really becomes this warm, fuzzy thing where you get to be a part of something bigger. And I really believe that's a big part of how we're able to deal with some of the resistance that we experience when we advocate. My participants talked about resistance coming from legislators, of course. Maybe you have legislators that don't understand what we do. Maybe you have a legislator that was told in high school by their school counselor that they weren't meant to go to college. That's a hard thing to overcome. Maybe it's legislators that do value school counselors, but don't really see where they can put it in the budget. So those things are challenges that we have to overcome. Sometimes, though, the resistance comes internally. Maybe it's school counselors that don't understand the importance of comprehensive school counseling programs. Maybe they don't understand why it's important to get out of your offices and not just do individual work. So there's resistance from several different levels. But the easiest way to deal with the resistance really is the fact that through public arena advocacy, you are using your voice for change for students. And that's a really good feeling. As school counselors, we do work every day that happens to make students' lives better. But when you get involved in public arena advocacy, your impact is so much bigger. And you're really making a difference on a social justice level to really impact what's going on for students through legislation or through policy. So I hope that the videos from the school counselors that follow me really will encourage you to get involved with advocacy. It can be really, really simple, or it can be really, really big. Thank you so much.
So wow, I'm so tickled at the comments in the chat because it just makes me feel really good that we did something great. You know, we've got a good PR piece, we've got some good PSAs. And truly, this video was made to hopefully encourage folks to get involved and to speak up and to get to know those legislators that are in your area, to let them know what you do every day and how you impact the lives of students. So one of the things that, you know, our video talked about and the Nelson Mullins video talked about was making sure that we reach out and we thank the legislators that have helped us. So we want to encourage everybody on this call to send a little note of thanks to our legislators that were on this video earlier on. And so Gail has put that in the chat. Their email addresses, certainly you can look up their physical addresses and send them a note of thanks. In the video and even Nelson Mullins' video, we often talk about ratios, and that's a big advocacy piece for school counselors. You know, in our state, we now have a ratio, recommended ratio of 1 to 450. And ASCA is doing work on a national level. I don't know how many of you saw the PSA that ASCA put out that Representative Linda Sanchez noted first week of February is National School Counseling Week. And she talked specifically about the ratio, I think specifically because of what's going on in the world right now. And she mentioned that the national average is 1 to 430 and that needs to be reduced. Well, we're at 1 to 450, so we're still working on it. We're not giving up. Our ASCA ratio, as recommendation, is 1 to 250, but these things take time. It also takes voices. It takes all of us speaking up and doing this work. So we really, really appreciate everybody on this call. I think it's time now to kick it over to Kirby, who's going to kind of get our Q&A started.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And I don't know about you guys, but this video definitely gets me fired up. And I want to thank Jennifer and her student for producing this video and putting it together. You guys did a phenomenal job. And I get fired up just because we learned so much from the video, right? Like in the video, we heard about school counselors going from vocational leaders to being guidance counselors to professional school counselors, which is who we are now, right? We learn about the history, the legislators being regular people just like you and I. And I think that's important to me because when I think about a legislator, I don't think that they're accessible, but they really, really are. They're people who want to hear from us. We also heard about advocating on the micro and macro level and relationship building inside and outside of our school building. It's just such a great video. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for putting it together. And
My pleasure.
and this is our closing. We have had so much fun with you guys today, and all of the comments and the encouragement that you have sent our way. We have just a few minutes left. We actually have about 25 minutes, and we want to hear from you. So we're going to open it up to Q&A for anyone who has any questions for us, or even if you're interested in learning how to get started with advocacy, this is definitely the time to ask us questions and talk to us about it. So we're going to be looking at the chat, and if you have a question, we can actually have people raise their hands just so that everyone is not speaking out at the same time, and then we'll call on you so that we can make sure that not everyone is speaking at the same time.
And Jennifer, we do have a question in the chat about the video that you produced. Will that be made available to our members?
I think I'm going to have to kick that to Lisa to answer that question. I am sure that we can share that somehow on social media. I'm a school counselor. I'm not a technological guru, so it took me a minute to get it from my student in my Google Drive, and then to figure out how to get it to Lisa and get it out of our district's Google Drive. But I am certain that's something that we can do.
Absolutely, we will be sharing this video. Thank you. 100% ASAP.
Thanks, Lisa.
I see a question in the chat. Tisha asks, for when I get started with advocacy outside of the school building, should I get started with the thank you letter? Yes, Tisha, that's the perfect start. Write some letters to those folks saying thank you. I think, we can even you can send letters to your local representatives, thanking them for the House resolution, acknowledging National School Counseling Week. There's a lot, and sometimes it's just simple. Sometimes it's a letter just letting them know, hey, I want to get to know you. I'm a school counselor. I live and work in this district, or whichever one it is. And just letting them know that you are somebody that they can reach out to. Again, one of the things that happens is your legislators then start to see you as a valid and reliable, trustworthy source of information about what's going on in schools, but they don't know you unless you reach out to them. Any other questions or comments? I've got a little piece of advice in terms of developing relationships. If you've heard me talk about advocacy before, you've heard this. But one of the things that I do every year, minus this year, of course, is I get my local representative to come out and do a flag training session, a flag folding and flag raising session with our little flag council that we have. And it's a good photo op. Of course, legislators love photo ops because they want to be able to show that they're out in the community interacting. I have had our local area representative come to our school counseling advisory meetings when we're presenting data, and that way they know what's going on. I've had somebody from our city council come in and join those. So those are some easy things that we all have opportunities. We have to kind of maybe think outside of the box, and also make sure you're letting your principal, your administration know that you've invited somebody like that into your building. They definitely want to be aware of that. But there's always ways that we can get them involved because they want to know. They really, truly do. And again, it just builds that relationship piece.
And I agree with Jennifer. If you were thinking about inviting any decision maker into your building for a tea, a show and tell, for a meeting, for a board member to sign off on your ramp application, talk to your building administrator first. You do not want to invite guests into your building and not have your principal know. So that's really important advice, Jennifer, to get that permission first. And for those of you who are entertaining the idea of applying for ramp, you do have to get your board member to sign off on your application. And so that's usually a great way to talk about your data, to talk about your school counseling program. And even if you're doing it virtually, that's fine, or face-to-face, but to really showcase what your school counseling program is doing. We've seen the benefits of that and getting board members informed about your role.
And Gail, I can second that because that was my story. And in getting board members and parents involved, we were able to ramp and get a second full-time counselor. I see another question on the chat that says, can someone recap HOPE or the new bill?
There are 3 bills, and I've not read them. Let me find my notes. Hang on. That were introduced by Representative Evans. We'll try to get a recap of those just in lay language and blast it out to our members. And this is really for high school people. George didn't really talk about the particulars of each bill, but we can get that for you and send it out. I would not be saying it accurately if I tried to do that right now. And I don't want to give, none of us wants to give bad information. So we'll get that to you, blast it out. Any other questions or comments? We're getting a lot of nice comments in chat. But anything else?
I want to take the opportunity to make a comment before we even think about closing this. There are so many of you on this call, and lots of the names I recognize, lots of the names I don't recognize. We want you to get involved. And like Representative Gamble said, next year we'll be at the Capitol. We will have boots on the ground and people in that building. So I hope that this has inspired all of you to, at the very least, keep abreast of what's happening. And then next year, join us at the Capitol. Can y'all imagine having this many school counselors walking around that building and talking to our legislators, making appointments to meet with them? There is power in numbers, and there's power in our words. So we need to make sure that we bring it.
And I want to share a closing thought with you guys before we wrap this up as well. And that's about your advocacy in terms of supporting GSCA, because advocacy occurs at a lot of different levels with a lot of different people and ways. And because we are the master advocates, we stand up and fight for our kids every day. We can extend that out into other arenas, but we have a really simple way for you to do your advocacy work so that the 3 of us and the GSCA leadership team and Nelson Mullins can continue to do the advocacy work that we're doing. And that's by joining GSCA. We've been talking about that at every event during conference. This has been a particularly distressful financial year for GSCA, as it has been for all professional associations and school districts. It's been tough for everyone. But this year of course, our membership has fallen off a little bit, and we're just so excited and thankful for everyone who signed up to attend our virtual conference. But as you guys might know, our face-to-face conference is one of our big money makers. And it's through that in your membership that we're able to do the wonderful things that GSCA does for its members and non-members. So we're asking you at the lowest level of advocacy, at the lowest level of leadership, if you've not already, to join GSCA. And if you're a member, to get a friend to join. If all of you, at one point there were 140 people on the call. Right now we're right at 114. If all of you got someone to join GSCA right now, I feel like I'm doing a sales pitch on Georgia Public Broadcasting. But if all of you could get someone to join with you, it would really do a lot to beef up the financial situation, and we're not in dire straits, but it would do so much to strengthen the GSCA financial situation right now, so that moving into next year, we can continue to afford to do great conferences and to do this advocacy work, to keep a paid lobbyist, and to provide the webinars and all the other wonderful things that GSCA does for members. But if you join and you don't participate, at least we benefit from your membership dollars. The second tier of that, the second level, is to join and participate. And then the third level is to join and lead, and ask the incoming presidents if you can serve on leadership teams. Volunteer for committees. Some of you are texting and emailing that you wanted to be involved in advocacy. Email us and let us know. But that at that top tier of being a member and leading is really the epitome of advocacy for school counselors. So we are asking you to join, and then to get a friend to join, maybe by the end of the week. We would love to see our membership numbers uptick. So that's my dog and pony show and my wrap-up comments. Kirby, do you have anything?
There is a question on the chat that I don't think I'm qualified to answer, but it's a great question. It's about monthly deductions for membership for GSCA. I don't know if that's an option. Jennifer?
We have talked about that. We are working with our management office to see how we could do that without adding fees on our end of how the calculations would work for that. So we have discussed that. And I think even during Maria's term, we had discussed that. So it is on the table. We're trying to figure that out. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. And so just please, let's wait on that information. But thank you so much, Jennifer.
You're welcome.
For participation as well. All right. Any other questions? Any last minute? All right. Well, you guys know how to get a hold of us. We're very excited to spend this time with you today, and we hope that you have been more than anything empowered to have a voice in your schools, empowered to continue moving forward, especially given that this has been such a difficult school year. But just know that we're thinking of you. We're sending you lots of positive thoughts and energy, and we're working for you. So we hope to see you again in the future.
Thanks everyone for being on the call.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for your advocacy and support. Thank you guys. It's really appreciated, especially now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.